and welcome to today's X Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled, How to Navigate the Health Canada XML PM Requirements. My name is Sonia Hunt, and it's my pleasure to be your X Talks moderator for today. At this point, I'd like to thank ReadTech, who developed the content for this presentation. ReadTech is the provider of best-in-class information-based solutions and services, offering product and services solutions to help life sciences professionals gain control over their own and their industry's data. Their offerings smooth the collection, transformation, submission, and analysis of regulatory data for manufacturers and distributors or medical device and drug products, and for those who support them in consulting and IT roles. ReadTech is a LexisNexis company. Now it's my pleasure to introduce you to your speakers for today's webinar. And first, I'd like to introduce you to Gary Stainer. He is the Senior Manager of Information Solutions at ReadTech. He is a subject matter expert on pharmaceutical structured product labeling and other structured content reporting to regulatory agencies and commercial organizations. He has over 30 years of experience in software development, process management, and data administration, with the last 15 years focused on the life sciences industry. He serves as a co-chair of the industry structured product labeling technical team and on the advisory board of the Medical Devices Group. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce you to your second speaker, and she is Caitlin Zappino-Clark, Account Executive with ReadTech. Caitlin helps life sciences companies save time and effort while complying with the FDA and Health Canada drug restriction, or rather registration requirements. In addition, Caitlin helps organizations streamline drug label research and comparisons for product development and competitive comparisons. Now it's my pleasure to pass over the controls and mic over to Caitlin and Gary, and Caitlin will be our first speaker. So Caitlin, when you're ready, you may begin.
Wonderful, and thank you, Sonia, and thank you to everyone for joining Gary and I today for our presentation on how to navigate Health Canada XML product monograph requirements. Gary, if you don't mind switching to the next slide, I'll take the audience through our discussion topics for today. Great, so we'll be spending the majority of our time on points 2 and 3, but before we get there, Gary will take you through the basics of XML and SPL for just a few minutes, and then we'll get into a description and summary on the new Health Canada XML product monograph requirement. We'll also get into some details on timing and how to submit this type of information. And then we'll also touch on how ReadTech can help before leaving some time for question and answer. Now, before I toss it to Gary, I just want to show this screenshot of how to access ReadTech's Knowledge Center. Now, everyone on today's call will receive a copy of the recording and slides, but this is a great resource for previous webinars that ReadTech has done, articles, and blog posts. So with that being said, Gary, I know during the presentation today we'll be using a lot of terms and abbreviations. So can you take the audience through the meaning and the importance of XML and SPL?
Yes, thank you very much, Caitlin. We'll go through a little bit of basics on XML and SPL. Those terms are all about, and we'll be using those and some other terms throughout. And we'll be trying to cover some ground here right in the beginning before we get into the Health Canada XML product monogram. But as a base, and some of you in the audience may be familiar with this particular content if you had been submitting drug labeling to the FDA. So this is a little bit of a rehash for you, but bear with us, and we'll be getting into the Health Canada content very shortly. So XML is an abbreviation for Extensible Markup Language, and it is a particular set of rules that allow you to put various text, paragraphs, tables, footnotes, lists, headings, and so on, and you're able to capture all that into a particular format. And you will soon come across, when you have conversation about XML, two different types of views. The first view is what is referred to as the raw view, and that is the text view. Very good for machines to go through and read that content. It is also the view that you would be seeing if you were doing authoring or editing the content and writing XML in a basic language. But it does have all that tagged information, and it's not typically what we would read when we see a rendered view, which is the second view. And that is much more akin to what you would see in a Word document. It's presented in a browser based on some instructions based in a style sheet. But that is the presentation view, and simple browsers like Chrome or Microsoft Edge or those similar type of browsers are able to render that content in something that's a little bit easier to read. Now, moving over to structured product labeling, SPL, this is basically a subset standard that uses XML as the basis. And it was going back to the original beginnings of SPL, FDA, and Health Level 7 worked together to create a set of rules and referred to that particular set of rules as structured product labeling. And now Health Canada has adopted that. So as a baseline, Health Level 7 is that standards developing organization, and they maintain, and there's been numerous changes over the course of time, a standard of how you create and mark up a document, and those particular instructions are referred to as a schema. Now, over top of that schema, there are various implementation guides, and by way of controlled vocabularies and a style sheet to render that information, you can create many different implementations of that particular standard. I believe FDA has like 57 or so different versions, but they started off initially with a small subset of those. One of those is the SPL National Drug Code Labeler Code request. There's a second one, which is a different content, but it still uses the very same basic schema for establishment registrations, and significant use, high volume use of the HL7 SPL standard to create labeling documents and listing documents that are submitted in SPL. And then most recently, Health Canada, by way of a set of guidance documents and so on, created their particular instance for capturing product monograph information in what they refer to as the XML product monograph. So with all that said, I'm going to move over to Health Canada, XML product monograph, and cover some basics in that particular area. So if you've been working with Health Canada, you're very familiar with the product monograph. It's that document that describes the product, the claims, indications, conditions of use, basically all the very pertinent information that is necessary for a particular drug, use and application of that drug. There are 3 sections: the health professional information, scientific information, and the patient medication information. So I might refer to PMI for that last one, but those are the 3 sections. And historically, that content has been submitted in PDF format to Health Canada for review and approval and use. Now, because of the many advantages of XML, Health Canada saw that there was interest in moving over to an XML version of that, and they created this initiative. It goes back a number of years. They wanted to improve the accessibility, the quality, being able to have machines make good use of that particular data, and also move into some international standards. So that information is not only the product monograph, but some information about the organization and in the drug product. So there's some metadata that is included. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So one thing I'll just quickly mention, you may have heard the abbreviations SPM, or Structured Product Monograph. That was the name originally used by Health Canada for this very same project, but more recently, it's now been termed the XML product monograph. So let's dive into some of the details. What is in scope for this particular project? Well, it includes primarily those human, pharmaceutical, radiopharmaceutical, and biologic prescription drugs. So those particular drugs are connected with submissions, electronic submissions. So you may be familiar with the ECTD submissions for new drug submissions, supplements thereof, and the abbreviated new drug submissions. And they all make use of a 2020 template. We'll dive into that a little bit because that's a little bit of a wrinkle that came on at the end of last year. Out of scope are those particular drug products that are over the counter, that those non-prescription drugs, and there's a number of those others listed there. And all those previous templates that were used for product monographs prior to 2004, the 2004, 2014, 2016, all of those are not included in this particular initiative. So I have a little bit more information about those templates because it's a matter that you would definitely want to address as you move into capturing your information in XML product monograph. Over the course of years, Health Canada has adopted and published a number of different standards. This isn't a comprehensive list. There's more to this list, but these are the primary ones that are out there. And each one of those versions have 6 different subsections, and depending on your particular product, you would follow a number of these guidelines to compose and to write your template. With the addition of this XML product, Health Canada has elected to create a 2020 version. And noteworthy is that it's very similar to the 2016. There's just a few realignments of sections and a little bit of content change, but not significant. But it does combine all those 6 individual subcategories into one master template. So going forward, there's only one template that needs to be addressed, and there's various sections that would apply to a particular drug type. I think I'll stop right here and ask Caitlin, you have been communicating with a number of different clients on these particular topics, and is there a sense of where all these particular templates are at this point in time? You know, what are people using? Is there understanding that they will have to go over to that 2020 template before they convert and make a XML product monograph version of that? So where do we stand?
Yeah, it's a great question, Gary. And I think from speaking with customers, there's a lot of variation within the industry. And then there's even variation within organizations. So there could be multiple different product monograph templates depending on the product. You know, those legacy products that are older, maybe in the older product monograph template. Some of the newer ones may already be in the 2016, but we're definitely seeing a lot of variation. And in terms of awareness, I think people now realize that there's this thing called a 2020 template, and that's the step they need to do before converting into XML. So from speaking with customers, a lot of organizations are in that process right now.
Yeah, very good. Now, we also get a lot of questions about the comparison between Health Canada and the FDA. So Caitlin and I have put together a number of slides that address the comparison between the FDA and Health Canada XML product monograph. Some of the ones that I will highlight here, it would be that the scope is quite different. So only the human prescription drugs, as I touched on, none of the drugs related to veterinary drugs or the over-the-counter. 58 total. I think I might have said 57 earlier, but now 58 FDA versions. But guess what? Only one in Health Canada. So by the way, nothing new there. FDA started with one drug document type and then expanded very early on. So Health Canada is following that particular pathway. As to the content, what will be new is you're familiar with all the 3 sections of the product monograph, but what is new is this product listing information that would need to be corrected and captured inside the XML version. We'll touch a little bit more about that. 2020 template mentioned. Oh, and then another big change, there's English and French versions. So unlike FDA, where only the content needed to be submitted in English, we'll talk a little bit more about the French requirements and identification of the product being different, a DIN being used in Health Canada. Both use that very same schema from Health Level 7, and the implementation guide, control vocabulary, and a style sheet connected with these documents are both customized. FDA has their set of customizations. Health Canada has their own. They did use the FDA as a precedent, so there is a lot of similarity. And you read one set of documents and you see how it kind of molded into the Health Canada version, but it's not a cookie cutter. So the rules are different, the guidelines are different. So you do have to pay attention to what is enforced for the Health Canada to make it a valid entry. The other two significant differences are in regard to authoring and validation. FDA does offer some free web-based tools to author the content and to validate the content. That is not the case with Health Canada. They are relying on industry, so either you have an in-house solution or you work with a vendor to have a authoring tool specifically for Health Canada product monographs in the same regard for the validation. Here's a couple more attributes. Packaging, the way this particular information is sent to the FDA is by way of an ECTD, but the listing information is a standalone file submission. So actually the establishment registration and NDC drug label or code requests are independent standalone SPL files. That is not the case with Health Canada. Health Canada has their product monograph, you know, that's the single document that's in the subject here. It will be included as a particular connection to the leaf inside of ECTD for labeling. The other difference is the actual documents that are supported in regard to images. So various figures, illustrations, chemical structure are all supported, but the difference is that Health Canada has not included the package image, so there's no principal display panel image. Both of them use the very same FDA electronic submission gateway. Health Canada happens to refer to that as the common electronic submission gateway, but it's one and the same. It's just a matter of redirecting to Health Canada when that submission is sent. I'll touch on the last item here, that this is a multi-step process. So especially when you have initial review and ongoing reviews by Health Canada, there will be obviously some feedback by way of a Word document, and updates need to be made into the XML. And then there's a second language issue. So those are some things. Hopefully that was very helpful. And I think at this point, Sonia, what I think we might do is maybe launch some poll questions, and let's do 3 of them back to back here and get a sense of where the audience is.
Okay, I will do that right now. Thank you very much, Gary. Just like you said, I'll launch our first poll question. Now, these poll question is done in real time, so your participation is strongly encouraged and very much appreciated. So our first poll question is, do you have plans to build your own solution to convert product monographs into XML, or do you plan to use an outside vendor? So please go ahead and cast your vote. I'll give you 40 seconds to complete this first poll question. And your options below are plan to build our own solution, or plan to use an outside vendor, or I am not sure. Okay, it looks like we have the majority of our audience members have cast their votes, so thank you very much. I'll give a few more seconds for those of you who have not. If you can do so now, it'd be greatly appreciated. Okay, that looks like it's everyone. All right, I'm now going to close the polls and share the results of our first poll question. And the first poll question was, do you have plans to build your own solution to convert product monographs into an XML, or do you plan to use an outside vendor? And we have 8% saying they plan to build our own solution. 43% plan to use an outside vendor, and 49% plan on saying I am not sure. Okay, so that is our first poll question. Now we'll go on to poll question number 2. And here it is in front of you. And now for poll question number 2, what product monograph template or templates are your products based on? So check all that apply. And you have a couple to choose from below: prior to 2004 template, 2004 template, 2014 template, 2016 template, or 2020 template. I'll give a few more seconds. Okay, that looks like it's the majority of our audience members have cast their votes. I am now going to close the polls and share the results with you. Okay, so the question was, what product monograph templates or template are your products based on? And we said check all that apply. And we have 21% saying prior to 2004 template, another 21% saying 2004 template. Then we have 39% at 2014 template, 75% are at 2016 template, and then we have 54% saying 2020 template. So thank you everyone for participating in that second poll question. Now I'm going to launch the third poll question. And there it is in front of you. And the question is, how many of your product monographs do you estimate will need to be updated to the latest 2020 template? So please go ahead and choose from below. We got 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 25, 25 to 50, and 50 plus. Okay, I'll give you a few more seconds to complete this final poll question before I send it back to Caitlin and Gary. Okay, that looks like it's the majority of everyone. Okay, now I'm going to close the polls and share the results. So how many of your product monographs do you estimate will need to be updated to the latest 2020 template? And the results are here. We have 56% saying 1 to 5, 15% saying 5 to 10, 19% saying 10 to 25, and then we have 7% saying 25 to 50, and then only 4% saying 50 plus. So thank you everyone for participating in that final poll, in that third poll question. Now I hand it over to Gary and Caitlin.
Well, thank you very much, Sonia. I think what we'll do is turn our attention now over to the timing, and this is quite a frequent question that comes up. Now that I understand the scope and what needs to be done, what are the requirements for timing? And Caitlin, maybe you can help us answer some of these questions about when do I need to do something and how soon is it?
Yeah, well, you know, the simple answer is it's happening now, and we'll get into some additional details on that in the next few slides. Now, before we get into what's happening today, I'll take you through this slide, which highlights some of the activity over the last few years. As you can see, the earliest date on this slide is 2017, and that's when Health Canada began the testing phase of the XML product monograph initiative. Now, ReadTech was part of that testing phase. We collaborated with Health Canada and 3 large pharmaceutical manufacturers during that testing phase. Now, moving on to some of those dates in 2019, as you can see, Health Canada started rolling out their intent and even 2 draft implementation guides in 2019. And then it was last year in 2020 where they started firming up the details. Most notably in May of last year, they did delay the start of phase 1 to June, and that delay was because of COVID-19. And then late last year, as Gary mentioned earlier, Health Canada implemented the 2020 template in November. Now, the next slide talks about some recent news and updates. As mentioned, Health Canada and ReadTech worked closely together during the testing phase starting in 2017. So ReadTech has a great working relationship with the project manager there, Tracy Brown, and we receive periodic updates from Tracy. And as you can see from the information on the slide here, there have been some updates over the last 2 months. And most recently, there was an update last Friday. And part of that involved some updates to the French section headings. So as Gary mentioned, there's French and English for this initiative. And again, those French section headings were updated on Friday of last week. Now getting into where we're at today, as you can see, there are 3 phases, and we are towards the end of phase 1. So phase 1 is where organizations can participate, but they have to request to participate. We are closely monitoring when phase 2 will begin. We have heard that phase 2 will begin this spring. And that phase will be open to all of industry, where you don't have to request to participate, but it will still be voluntary. Now, we expect phase 2 to last through the end of this year, maybe even into early next year. And we do expect there to be some type of evaluation period that evaluates how phase 1 and phase 2 went before moving into that phase 3, which is the mandatory period. Now, we don't have a date for when phase 3 will begin. Certainly, we'll be monitoring that and updating everyone as we learn more. But just wanted to note here, when I say mandatory, I mean for any new product monographs or updates to product monographs. At that point in phase 3, those will be required to be submitted in XML. Now, as you can see from that light blue area, what about all of the legacy product monographs that don't have any updates? We have heard that there may be, and I want to reiterate there may be a period down the road where those legacy product monographs will need to be converted into XML. But again, that's something that we're going to be monitoring. No definite dates or information yet on that. And this slide here is similar to the information we just reviewed together. There's some additional details that you can certainly review once you receive the slides after today's webinar. So with that being said, I think, Sonia, it's my time to pass it back to you for poll question number 4.
Yes, thank you very much, Caitlin. Yes, I'm going to launch poll question number 4 right now. And just like before, audience members, it's done in real time, so I'll be able to share the results with you. I'll give you 40 seconds to complete this poll question. And do you plan to participate in the voluntary phase planned for this spring, or do you plan to wait until the mandatory phase? So please select the options that you have there below. One option is plan to participate in the voluntary phase, plan to wait until the mandatory phase, or I'm not sure. I'll give a few more seconds. Okay, that looks like it's everyone. Thank you, everyone, for participating in poll question number 4. And here are the results. So we have here, do you plan to participate in the voluntary phase plan for this spring, or do you plan to wait until the mandatory phase? And the results are here. We have 3% saying plan to participate in the voluntary phase, 48% say plan to wait until the mandatory phase, and then we have 48% saying I'm not sure. So thank you, everyone, for participating in that poll question. Now back to Caitlin and Gary.
Great, and thanks, Sonia, for launching that 4th poll question. Now we're going to move on to how organizations can prepare this type of information and then submit it. Gary, I get asked this question, and customers would like details on this all the time. Do you mind sharing with the audience a little bit more about how to prepare and submit this type of information?
Well, certainly, there is a challenge between, or challenge to the drug product manufacturers to prepare this content and submit it to Health Canada. Now, it uses the very same methodology and packaging that is currently being used. So we already referred to the electronic submission gateway as the vehicle to send information packaged in a ECTD submission. So it might be a labeling submission. But before that particular package is sent off, there are some initial steps along the way that you definitely be familiar with. So there's no change to authoring the content. You do have to make sure that you adhere to the 2020 template. So that is actually going to be a challenge, especially as the templates that are in play right now, the older that you had used, there's more of a conversion and rewriting, but that is activity that you're already familiar with. You already know how to do the product monograph creations and so on, so no change there. Secondly, there's this requirement for translation, and again, no change there. Both English and French, you have various connections and either internal or external means to translate content from the primary to secondary. Caitlin and I will be referring to translations next couple slides, and we understand there's a primary language, and then that can be English or French, and then the secondary language, to follow on. But in our examples here, we'll use the English just for conversation purposes. Obviously, it can be switched. But what is new in this challenge is creating the XML product monograph. That is the challenge and does take some technical expertise to get that information tagged and packaged and to be valid according to the Health Canada rules and validation rules. This new task does have a couple caveats around it. So unfortunately, there is not a Health Canada online authoring tool where you can simply go online and enter the content and create this XML file. Nor is there a Health Canada online validator, which means what you write has to be based on the various structures and the schema of that XML that Health Canada has put together, as well as making sure that you use the particular control vocabularies for both the metadata, this is the information about the product, and also those section headings and so on. There's numerous terminology lists that Health Canada has put together. So I think the bottom line is that either an internal tool or perhaps a vendor tool would come into play to make this a much more efficient activity. So with that understood, I just want to touch and talk a little bit about the product metadata elements, because this is brand new. These particular product attributes are something that you would be familiar with if you were submitting the drug product to the FDA. In fact, if your drug product is distributed in both US and Health Canada, you can look to these, the FDA as a precedent and make some, reuse of that particular activity. But not every terminology list is the same. So there are some differences, when you talk about dosage form and so on. And it's not a one-to-one correspondence, but it certainly will get you well along the way. So there's about 70 data elements about each drug product that need to be included with the XML. When that metadata, along with the product monograph narrative, is created, the raw version, and remember, this is probably something that you will not be dealing with. And if you're looking at this, you probably don't have the right tool. But this is the raw XML that captures that information. So we won't go through this, but I tell Caitlin, I have to have one slide that has the XML content, and this is that slide. So there's a particular line in here that talks about acetaminophen, the tablet and capsule and so on. So you can kind of see some things in there about how it would be created, but this has to be created according to the FDA, according to the Health Canada schema rules. What you would normally see is this nice rendered view. It looks so much better. And I must say that Health Canada did a really nice job of presenting this information. They authored this style sheet. And on the left-hand side, you'll find a table of contents for those various sections. And on the right-hand side, you're able to scroll up and down and see information about the drug. So the first bit of information are the product details. So everything that we saw in those spreadsheets earlier are here in a much more elaborate fashion, and you can dive into that and receive a lot more information. We'll take a look at that in a second. And then that is followed by the actual narrative. So this was what you would normally see, you know, like if you were to look at this content in a Word document or PDF. If we dive into the product details, you'll see that I expanded some views here. Won't go into all of this, but there's a very nice presentation. Looks very good. It's very clear. And there's a lot of similarities with the FDA on this particular chart presentation. But you will see these values that are encoded in that XML file being rendered in a much more easily read type of presentation here. Now, I'm going to switch this back over to Caitlin, and if you don't mind, how is RETEC able to help the clients that you speak to, and perhaps those in the audience, with these particular challenges, and what services do we offer to help them out?
Absolutely, Gary, and I can take the audience through that for just a few slides before we get into the question and answer. So as Gary mentioned, there is a new task of creating that XML. And Gary, if you don't mind switching to the next slide.
Sure.
Thank you. Yes, so there's that new task, something brand new, where you need to convert that product monograph information into XML. That middle box there summarizes how RETEC can help with that new task. Now, RETEC provides a fully outsourced XML product monograph conversion and preparation service. What does that mean to our customers, and how do they work with us? That first arrow there at the top showing the source product monograph over to RETEC. So obviously the customer would send RETEC the product monograph, but it's not just that product monograph narrative. RETEC helps our clients collect that product information. As Gary mentioned, there's about 70 product elements we help organizations understand and collect through our proprietary data collection forms. Once we have that product monograph and those product data elements, that information goes through a very rigorous workflow as we convert and validate it into XML. We then send it back to the customer in a submission-ready XML format. However, we don't just send the XML document. With every XML file, we also send a quality report detailing our feedback and things that we found during the conversion and validation process. Then you continue along with the process that you're used to in terms of placing that into the ECTD submission and then submitting through the ESG to Health Canada. And the next slide gives just a little bit more detail on some of those points that I talked about. You can certainly review this in more detail after today's webinar. One thing I did want to point out, on the very bottom right-hand side, if you see where it says 20 days. So the process that I just talked about needs to be completed twice because, as Gary told us, there is the English and French version of the product monograph in XML. Now, the rule is that the secondary language needs to be submitted to Health Canada within 20 days of the first. So what we have found works best is, because that 20-day window is a short period of time, we have found it works best to provide us with that secondary language product monograph as early as possible. And even maybe a few days after giving us that primary language product monograph. What we can do is convert that secondary product monograph into XML at the same time as we're negotiating with Health Canada on that first language. So that way we can be that much more ahead of the game and ultimately collapse that window to ensure that you're complying within that time frame, and ultimately just have to make final tweaks to the secondary language based on how everything ends up with the first. So that's something that we recommend. It just really helps organizations comply in that window. And then just to summarize, as mentioned, ReadTech is supporting phase 1, that by request period that we're in today. We are helping customers with XML product monograph conversions and those that have requested and gotten that approval to participate in phase 1. And how are we able to help with this new type of XML product monograph conversion? There's a few main reasons, and really the main one is our 16 years of experience with FDA SPL conversions. I have to give Gary a shout out. Him and other members of the ReadTech team were part of the team that created ReadTech's solution for the SPL initiative that the FDA mandated in 2005. So we're able to leverage that FDA SPL experience in addition to the collaborative working relationship that we've built with Health Canada since 2017 as we were participating in that testing phase to then create a solution for Health Canada XML product monograph services. And just one additional thing to note, that first bullet under the second area, we can also help migrate 2016 templates to the new 2020 template. So if anyone would like to learn more about that, or how we can help with phase 1 and future phases and support your organization with that, please don't hesitate to reach out and let us know. And then finally, just some customer testimonials on the slide here. You can take a look at these once we send you the slides. And with that being said, I think, Sonia, back to you for poll question 5, our final poll question, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I'm going to just launch our final poll question right now. But first, I want to say thank you very much for that very insightful presentation. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Okay, so now let me launch our final poll question. And here it is, everyone. You should see it in front of you. Okay, and the question that we have for you is, do you need help transitioning your product monograph templates in the 2020 template? So please go ahead and choose one of the below, yes, no, or I don't know. Okay, that looks like it's the majority of everyone. I'm now going to close the polls and share the results. Okay, so for our final poll question, do you need help transitioning your product monograph templates into the 2020 template? And we have 0% that said yes, 41% said no, and 59% said I don't know. So thank you everyone for participating in that final poll question. And now we're going to begin the Q&A portion of the webinar. So I would just like to invite our audience members to continue sending in their questions using that questions window, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the time that we have together here. Okay, so I've already received some questions already from our audience members, so I'm going to start with those questions. And here's our first question, Caitlin and Gary. And the question is, are all drugs included OTC required to transition to XML? Who would like to answer that one?
I can take a first stab at that one. All the drugs that are inside the scope. So we talked a little bit earlier about the scope. So there's not all drugs. certainly carve out those veterinary drugs, certainly carve out the human over-the-counter drugs and those non-prescription drugs. So it is only a subset of all the drug products that are commercially distributed in Health Canada would need to be converted. So that's the down select from all the drugs in the inventory that you might be marketing in Canada. The other issue is when the initiative goes into this mandatory phase, the initial wave is only those particular product monographs that are brand new or that have a change, and you're submitting that information to Health Canada for a review. So there's a gradual implementation, if you will, as Caitlin had described. So it's not all product monographs, from day one. Caitlin, did you want to add anything to that? I'm sorry.
Yeah, Gary, I think you covered everything. And I think you even alluded to in your chart where you were comparing between US FDA, SPL, and then Health Canada, XML, PM, sort of the difference and how right now there's just one file type. The FDA, I think, has 58. So it'll be interesting to see over the years if Health Canada expands the use of XML for other document types like the FDA has.
Okay, thank you very much, Caitlin and Gary, for answering that question. Here's our next question. It's a little lengthy. Let's see if I can read it here all. The question is, for subsequent entry products, is there any flexibility in the time frame for mandatory XML PM since subsequent entry PMs cannot transition to the 2020 template unless the original NDS MHA update their template? Who would like to start with that one? Caitlin or Gary?
I can give that a stab, and I think the question was about the ECT being an earlier format. So I'm sorry, would you be able to just touch on that one again, Sonia?
Yeah, not a problem. Here's the question again. For subsequent entry products, is there any flexibility in the time frame for mandatory XML PM since subsequent entry PMS cannot transition to the 2020 template unless the original NDS MHA update their template?
Right. So this is conditional on the. I think this question came up and is covered in the FAQs that Health Canada had rolled out, and the interrelation between the product that you might be distributing and the other precedent product. You can check with Health Canada on this particular topic. There may be a possibility, if you want to be aggressive and go ahead and convert it over, that there would be some considerations by Health Canada. Otherwise, following the format of the precedent drug. So I'm going to defer that one over to the Health Canada, and Tracy Brown might get a question on that one. We do have links to an email, by the way, in the presentation. So those questions that are better suited for Health Canada for an official answer, then you can contact the Health Canada reference desk up there.
Anything to add to that, Caitlin?
Nope, I think that covers it. If we learn anything in addition to that from Tracy, we'll certainly follow up with the participant that asked that.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Okay, here's our next question. What if my product monograph is not in the 2020 format?
Yep, so Gary, I can take a stab at that, and then please let me know if you'd like to add anything. So for new product monographs or any updates that impact the product monographs, in order for it to be converted into XML, it does need to be in that 2020 template. Now, again, remember, we're in phase one, we're at the end of phase one, which is the by request. It will then move to voluntary before being mandatory. So you have a little bit of time before it is mandatory to submit in XML. And sort of during that time, you can, then convert it into the 2020 template before converting it into XML. Gary, anything else to add there?
Yeah, I'll just supplement to what you mentioned, that the actual product monograph, regardless of what you do with XML submission, the actual product monograph, new submissions and changes that are in scope must be in the 2020 template. So as you're writing the Word document and getting ready to make submissions, you do have to use that 2020 template. Obviously, you submit that and have some changes over the course of time, and submit a PDF. But as I understand it, even some product monographs that were submitted near the end of last year might have received some pushback from Health Canada saying, "Oh, no, 2020 is our now new standard," and you might have had to already convert the actual product narrative to 2020. So that is already enforced, and you ought to have that on your agenda to make sure that you follow the 2020 template for new and changes going forward. Then, as Caitlin had mentioned, being able to submit that into XML is another consideration, and the timing of there is to be done at your best time that fits into your particular schedule, but keep in mind the particular brackets. And we think that this will now be opened up to all of industry later this spring, mid-year, so that if you want to participate in that voluntary period of time, you would be able to do that. So your product monograph needs to move over to 2020, even in the current type of submissions that you currently do.
Thank you very much both for answering that question. Here's our next question. This audience member is asking, in the US, our submissions are done in Microsoft Word with an accompanying SPL document. Will Health Canada just be using XML PMS for submissions, or will they require Microsoft Word as well? Who's going first with this one?
I'm going to grab that one because it's real easy. So yes, you do need to submit the initial XML product monograph in SPL and accompany it with a Word document. So having that Word document available and also annotated, so actually two versions, a nice, clean, pristine version, and then an annotated version showing changes. So all those documents need to be submitted initially. You do negotiations and updates with Health Canada using Word only, and then once that is finalized in the primary language, you submit a final SPL. So that particular procedure is identical to what you would see with the FDA. The difference in this case is that after you go through all that with the primary language, you submit your translated language thereafter in SPL.
Anything to add, Caitlin, or did he cover everything?
Nope, this is why we're so lucky to have Gary. That was the answer for me.
Okay, perfect. I'll go on to the next one. I think we'll try to squeeze in two more questions looking at the time here. Okay, here's our next question. What are the changes in the 2020 update to the product monograph guidance and template?
So the 2020, I think I'm going to defer this over to that FAQ document that is in the down in the appendix. People can go there and read additional about it, or search the web to find product monograph FAQs. But that particular document does a very good job of describing the versions and the conversion from 2016 to 2020, so that you can go there and get some good understanding there. If you go to the 2020 document, you'll see that I have seen at least two sections being flip-flopped in their order. So that definitely is a change, and you'll see some subsections at naming and so on that are different. For the most part, the Health Canada has mentioned that the content is the same. So there's minimal changes to the actual content. It's a little bit of reordering, new numbering, and some reorder of those two sections that I mentioned, but it's relatively minor compared to what you would have to go through to convert a 2004 or 2014 or 2016 or 2014 and earlier, I should say, into a 2020. That can be much more rigorous. A lot of sections are moved. In some cases, you have to combine sections and reorder and maybe have some new subsections to address. So that particular task is much more of a challenge than simply taking 2016 and migrating it to the 2020 template.
Yeah, and if for any reason you're interested in learning more about that, please don't hesitate to reach out. Gary and I work closely with our team of XML and SPL conversion specialists, and they're the ones that do these types of conversions and know in depth about that 2016 differences. So again, for more detail, don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, thank you. All right, let's squeeze in another question here. Do all drugs have a product monograph? This is how this person is asking here. Who would like to take that question?
That sounds like a trick question. And as I understand it, no. So you might find, if you go to the Health Canada website, there are some product monographs that are not there. So they might actually be under review or not yet published. So that's one possibility that you won't find a product monograph on that public website. And secondly, there are some legacy product monographs that were in place and long before this particular current set of documents were assembled. So those would not be up on the website either. For a little bit more research, if you want to dive into that, this particular question, I believe, is also covered in that FAQ document. So I've referred to that multiple times now. So that is a good document to do a quick read through. It covers a lot of questions and answers. So I think you'll find a little bit more details about why not all drugs are listed in the product monograph website.
Okay, I'm going to squeeze in this last question, and here it is. Is it mandatory to submit the XML product monograph in both English and French, or would submitting only in one language be sufficient?
Gary,
I think that's yours, Kaylee.
Yep, I was going to say that's mine, and the answer is it is required to be submitted in both English and French. And again, we do recommend sort of submitting that second language to us earlier, and shortly after submitting the first, we can sort of be that much more prepared to just make final tweaks to it based on what they say about the first, so that we can with that 20-day window.
Okay.
Yeah. So just a quick comment on that. That not only does the narrative need to be in both languages, but there are some fields for the metadata that need to be in both languages. So in some cases, it's a very nice one-to-one relationship. So if you pick an English language term, or French in a controlled vocabulary is one-to-one, or vice versa. You pick the French, it can be easily selected in the English language. But when you think about it, there are some text fields. So not only would you need English, but now you also need French for some of those text fields in the metadata. So keep that in mind. A couple fields have fall into that category. Otherwise, this audience is very familiar with creating both English and French narrative, but yeah, they do need to be in both.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Gary and Caitlin, for answering those questions. And I'd like to thank you very much, those audience members who sent them in. We have reached the end of the Q&A portion of the webinar. If we couldn't attend to your questions, the team at ReadTech may follow up with you after this presentation. And now, if you have any further questions, direct them to the email address that you see on your screen there. So there's an email address. Actually, there is their website and phone number, and there's their address there. Okay, so please go ahead and reach out to them and they'll be very happy to assist you. So thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from XTalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is appreciated as it will help us to improve on our further webinars. Now, I'm about to send you a link in your chat box in a few seconds here. You'll be able to view the recording of this event at that link and also share this link with your colleagues when they register for the recording as well. So I encourage you to do that. Now, please join us in thanking our speakers, Caitlin, Account Executive, and Gary, Senior Manager of Information Solutions, Life Sciences, both with RETEC for that very insightful presentation. So thank you very much, Gary and Caitlin.
Thank you so much, Sonia, and thank you everyone for attending.
Thank you. Okay, we hope you found this webinar informative. It has been my pleasure to be your webinar moderator. On behalf of the team here at XTalks, we thank you for joining us. Until next time, I'm Sonia Hunt. Please take care and bye for now. Bye, everyone. Thank you. Bye, Gary. Bye, Caitlin.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you now.